Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Carlos Gill, U.S. brand evangelist for GetResponse. Thank you so much for joining us for another webinar. Today's webinar is really exciting because joining me is Michael Barber. Michael is an email marketing expert. He's going to tell you all about himself here in just a moment, but I want to start off by saying I've personally known Michael now for many years. We've shared many stages together, and in my books, he is one of the go-to email marketing experts. So over the next hour, we're going to chop it up. We're going to talk about email marketing, all the different tips and tricks that are included in his all new course here on GetResponse. And with that, I just want to tee it up by welcoming you, Michael, to today's GetResponse webinar.
It's so good to be here. I appreciate the invitation and can't wait to have the conversation with you, Carlos, and looking forward to some good questions from the audience. I encourage you all to hop into that chat as we're going back and forth debating some questions related to email, and really happy to be launching my new course on GetResponse's platform in the next couple of minutes.
Now, before we get into your amazing course, Michael, let's talk about you, the professional. Like, how did you get started in the world of email marketing? For those that aren't familiar with your background and your work, just maybe take a few minutes to tell us about Michael Barber.
Yeah, this conversation about who's about me as it relates to email really starts at the beginning of my journey in marketing. I was really fortunate to get an opportunity to go work for this tiny little marketing agency called Mighty Interactive, and that agency was led by a guy named Jay Baer, which I'm sure some of your audience is familiar with. But we were doing email campaigns back in the day on this also tiny little email platform known as ExactTarget. Of course, ExactTarget would go on to be acquired and became a behemoth in the email space many, many years ago. And that is where my journey started with this particular marketing tactic. And we were doing e-commerce campaigns, personalization, and automation before even those words were being utilized to describe those tactics or those strategies around email. And so this has been a near and dear channel for me. Email has for the last 20 or so years of my career. And I've gotten the chance to work across both B2B and B2C when it comes to email, touching about somewhere between about 1 billion to 1.5 billion email sends over the past 20 years. So it's been a fun journey in this area.
Now, it's not often, Michael, that I meet other professionals that are passionate and excited about email marketing. Just using your words, you're excited about it. Okay. There's so many different trends that have come and gone. Obviously, my background, social media is the space where I've operated in for the majority of my career. What exactly is it about email marketing that excites you?
Well, it's interesting. Email, as I've described it many, many times, is like the least sexiest marketing tactic, right? It is tried and true. It's been around since, sort of the early days of the web, let's say 1996, when we got sort of the first public email addresses from the good old folks at Hotmail. And then, of course, as we've seen over the last, let's say, 30 years, it's just an incredible tactic that consumers have been around. It is like that old, if you will, grandma or grandpa of the digital world. And I think that's what has kept me close to it, is that it's been a tactic that's worked well across a number of years. From a consumer perspective, they know the inbox. It has not changed fundamentally that much to the end consumer, right? We still have their inbox. It's still, for the most part, chronologically ordered for most consumers that are opening those inboxes. Certainly different things have changed, but at its fundamental core, unlike, say, social, where you've spent the vast majority of your career, those algorithms are always changing. The experience is always changing, right? But with email, I think what's been interesting and kept me close to it is just this idea of like, hey, it hasn't evolved when you think of like at its core from a consumer perspective, right? And so consumers have been accustomed to this channel for so many years. And that's why I think it's remained such an impactful opportunity for brands, whether you're a small business, mom and pop, all the way through enterprise organizations. It's continued to have big impacts for those orgs because consumers, feel close to it and they're used to it, and it feels like sort of an old digital friend, if you will. For me personally, I think email, what is interesting is, and why I'm excited about it, is because we continue to see, even 30 years into this evolution of the inbox, we continue to see organizations just making mistakes when they should be, taking the time to really understand how to impact all the different types of engagement metrics that you can have in the inbox. And that's where I've spent my career, spending time on making sure that those organizations can have as much impact in the inbox, and keep coming back to it. It may be the least sexiest marketing tactic, but it's my favorite.
You say there's so much to unpack there. You say that it's the least sexy, and to an extent, I agree with you. Even though I work for GetResponse now, but I joined GetResponse 6 months ago to assume this role I'm in as brand evangelist, and it's ironic, right? Because I'm evangelizing an ESP. The majority of my career I've spent in social media marketing. So when I'm out on the road and I'm speaking at conferences about the power of email and how you can intertwine and marry email and social together, which I do want to talk about here over the next hour or so, is how you can use both. So many professionals are overlooking and disregarding email because I feel social media gives them that quick win, that quick dopamine rush, that quick hit of it's instant. You post on social, you can see there's some sort of instant KPI or ROI, even if it's a like, it's the vanity
Yeah.
metrics, but you can attest, just like I'm sharing with marketers now, like all those fluff metrics, all those numbers, they really don't mean much. Whereas email helps you go directly to your customer and you can truly measure impact in dollars and cents versus likes and followers with social.
Yeah, this is something you've talked a lot about on the stage, and that you do see a lot of social strategists talk about the comparison. I like to think the best analogy, if you will, is that social sort of is rented land, and email is sort of your home that you can own, right? At any given moment, the social algorithms can be adjusted, and the type of content that you've got, the cadence of content that you've got, what you're sharing for your fans, followers, and those advocates can suddenly drop off their feed. That's not really the case with the inbox. It's an area, that one-to-one relationship, when you have an opt-in relationship with a subscriber on the other end, allows you to get your eyeballs, your content onto their eyeballs. And certainly there are better ways to do it. And we're going to talk through a lot of those tips and tricks as we go through this conversation. But that importance, as you think about pairing social and email together, is really about how you get to, making sure that you're driving all those fans, followers, and advocates that you have on your social channels to some sort of landing page, some sort of website, some sort of conversion form where they can actually subscribe, so that you can build that relationship with them. You can understand so much more about a customer, about a fan, about a follower, of an advocate, when you have that email address. That is essentially a digital report card, if you will, a digital, if you will, ID for that individual, where they go in the web. And there's so much more that we can do in the inbox to target them with better personalization and better opportunities to connect with them when we have that email address, versus when they're just a follower on one of our social channels.
And you bring up such a good point about the email address being a part of someone's digital DNA or digital fabric, right? Because going back to this conversation of how do you use email marketing in combination with social media, it's very simple. You can use an email address. If you have an email address list, you can use that as a targeted list to run ads on social media. Like, that's the beauty when you have email. Let's think about all of our activities as consumers, right? In this whole digital ecosystem, you need to have an email address to sign into Amazon. You need to have an email address to sign into Instagram, right? Like, our email address is a core of who we are digitally. It's a big part of our identity. So even if you're not using email from a pure marketing standpoint with newsletters to send out campaigns, you can still use email addresses to target through ads on social. So that kind of brings me to my first question for you. Like, why do you feel that email is a system that's overlooked by so many businesses today?
Well, I think it's because they've been doing it for so long, right? They think that just the same things that they've been doing in the inbox continue to work. And I think the bigger issue is that they've hit averages. And when you hit industry averages, you typically see organizations go, "Oh, well, we've hit the averages, right? So how much harder do we need to try?" So I think that's the biggest issue, is like why we see organizations sort of kind of sleep on this channel regularly. I also think you sort of just nailed it on the head, if you will, to borrow a euphemism, as it relates to why is this so important. And that's just because of everything that you can do with an email address versus just a fan and follower on social, right? If we were having this conversation, let's say a decade ago, perhaps even longer, maybe 15 years ago, the value of that email address was just in relationship for you to send them a campaign in their inbox, right? It didn't really mean much more than that. Sure, you could personalize, sure, you could automate, you could do all those things back then. But that value of an email address was just an opt-in relationship, right? But as you just said a moment ago, that email address becomes the backbone of our digital DNA, how we connect, cookies and non-cookies and tracking technologies, and how we can leverage that email address becomes so much more important and so much more valuable for a brand when we can take it, understand the nuances of what that subscriber is doing on our websites, on our apps, in other third-party places that we may have relationships with. It's also about, how we go about targeting those individuals with better ads, right? The ability to take an email address and then retarget that individual with perhaps better content based on the browsing behavior that we've seen or what campaigns they have or have not opened. It also allows us to do, interesting things on social, like lookalike audiences, and target maybe friends, family, or geographic areas that may seem appealing to potential customers that we haven't even, figured out yet. So there's so much value to that email address versus, say, a fan or a follower on social that you don't get. And I think that's why you see, although a lot of brands are striving for averages, it's why you see the importance of brands starting to understand, hey, we've got to get access to that inbox, or at least get some information, whether it is sort of an email address, but we've got to get something that connects us to that subscriber or to that customer, because then we can do so much more interesting things as they get to know our brand and they go on this myriad of a journey trying to figure out how we get them to convert from, say, a prospect to a customer, and hopefully into an advocate for our brand.
Now let's talk a little bit more, Michael, of how email continues to evolve, right? Because I think it's important to reestablish, first of all, that when it comes to like legacy digital marketing systems, if you will, email marketing is the OG, right? I use this example a lot growing up in the 90s, just like you. Sorry to age you for a moment here. Like, we grew up in the era of
That's okay.
AOL.
That's okay.
We grew up in the era of AOL. And the first thing that you would hear when you would sign on to AOL was what?
You've got mail.
You've got mail. So before you go to a chat room, before you get a message, it was all about the email, right?
Yeah.
So like, I find myself reminding marketers of like the importance of email in the fabric of how we market.
Yeah,
But
it's
with that being
nostalgia,
said,
right? It's that feeling of like it's reminiscing what life used to be like. That's part of the appeal of email, right?
we could go into a whole tangent about like
We could.
90s culture, but for those that aren't old enough, that didn't live through that moment in history and time, back in the day, like the excitement of going onto AOL was all about hearing that you got mail, right? Like, this is before there was brands that were like using, like, I was 14, 15 years old, man. So there weren't brands that were marketing to me. It was just like, if I
Yeah.
had an email from a friend, or someone that took the time to send me an email, like, it was that euphoria, that rush that I believe social media, MySpace, then Facebook, like, it completely wiped all of that away. Like, we don't feel that level of excitement anymore. Now, I think that as marketers, it's our challenge, whether you're on the marketing side or you're an agency or you're a small business, like, it's your challenge to ensure that whenever you show up in someone's inbox, there is that feeling of excitement. Like, there's something unique that's for you. Now, let's talk about how this continues to evolve, though, right? Because even though it's an OG legacy system, like in the example here of GetResponse, we have AI tools that now are integrated into our offering. So you can use AI to help you write a subject line. You can use AI to help you write the body of your email. Like, how, besides AI, like, how have you seen email shift in the last couple of years? Like, specifically, how should brands be approaching this shift? Because I think it's unique. Like you mentioned, lookalike audiences. We talk here a lot about segmentation and personalization. I know you do as well. Like, what are some of the ways that email has shifted from it being like a one-to-many strategy to a much more intimate experience?
Yeah, I think the biggest shift for us as marketers when it comes to email, and really, any marketing channel that we're talking to, is how much access we have to first party data for potential customers and our customers alike, right? And the more, not necessarily the more data that we have on our customers, but the right data that we have on our customers, and we're keeping that data healthy, and we have a keen understanding of what their interests are, what things that they do like to interact with, that can have major impacts on the performance of our campaigns, because we can deliver more timely, targeted, and relevant content to them in the inbox, comparatively to that idea of one to many. If you're not serving that content at the right time with the right offer in the right way, that is that sort of classic one-to-many spray and pray opportunity. But with the plethora of data that we've got and getting access to good data and keeping that data as healthy as possible, we can deliver really interesting campaigns more than we ever have done before, well beyond sort of like, hello, first name, sort of situation. We can do so much more there. I do think that there are really interesting macro level changes that have happened in email that are important for brands to understand. One, there's way more email going into the inbox than there ever has done before, right? Part of that is just the sort of shift to remote work that we saw during the pandemic and being in quarantine, right? We suddenly email became vastly more important than it had and was top of the conversation, comparatively to years past. And so you saw the volume of email increase, and that has not really slowed down based on sort of all the data sources that I see from different deliverability partners. It's come down ever so slightly, but the volume of email continues to go up. And that means that there's a lot of noise in the inbox, right? There's more than ever, you are competing for space in that area. That gets to me just sort of the second big thing that's happened is that the inboxes, the ISPs, the internet service providers are trying to make it harder for us to get into the inbox, whether that's via deliverability, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as we get into some these additional questions. But they've also changed the experience for the end user, right? 10 years ago, maybe more than that, and I'm blanking on. I think it might have been 2014 when Gmail tabs came out, but it might have been a bit before that. But someone can check me on that in the comments. But that really started this shift inside of all these inboxes and devices. That's not slowed down, right? We saw Gmail tabs. We've now seen almost every major device or app that touches the inbox adjust the experience so that it's better for the end user, and that continues. Apple announced, I think it was over the weekend, their branded mail opportunity for brands. So now you can, as long as you have specific authentication records, as long as you have all your information in Apple Business Connect, you can now adjust that little image that shows up in all your Apple Mail apps for your subscribers. So depending upon if you've got sales reps that are getting into the inbox utilizing automations or sales enablement campaigns, they can have their image show up. But for the brand itself, we can start to adjust and hopefully drive eyeballs to our campaign. So all of that is to say that, yes, at its core, email has fundamentally remained the same. But when it comes to sort of the experience around the inbox, that's where I think that there's really big changes that, us as business owners and brands can take advantage of, and we'll get into a little bit of that as we go through some of these additional questions.
So my experience as a consumer is that email feels highly transactional. It doesn't feel it doesn't feel personal. And I think that's holistically brands across the board, right? I, as a consumer, outside of like my job working in marketing, there are very few brands that I follow through and through, because I just feel, again, like I use this as an example a lot, so I'm not picking on this brand, but Nordstrom's is a brand I'm very loyal to. I shop at Nordstrom's. Marriott, very loyal to. American Airlines. Like, these are brands as a customer I spend a lot of money with, but I also don't want to log on Instagram and always see your latest sale, your latest offer. Just like I don't want to open up my inbox and I'm constantly flooded, like every single day Nordstrom's has a sale or Best Buy has a sale. So like, maybe speak to some of the brands that you would say do email marketing really well, and they strike that balance where it's not always about the product, it's not always about the sale, but there's an experience. Like, you can open up the email and there's something that you're going to walk away with, like they put a smile on my face, something as basic as that, or they're not trying to sell me something, they're just engaging and reaching out to me as a human. Are there brands, even, Michael, and I hate to put you on the spot, but like, are there brands that even do that, or is it just about the sale?
I'll say 99. This is sort of like a 99.9% of the time. I think most brands are doing email wrong. And I'll talk about what I think the biggest issue is, and that's not providing exclusivity in the inbox, right? If you're going to ask someone to give you their email address, this is an exclusive relationship you're asking for to build a relationship with, right? The biggest single thing you can do to impact if someone's going to read your campaigns is pull back the red velvet rope and make the inbox the most exclusive place for deals, conversations, personalization, etc. Right? Yes, you can, if you're going to do offers, you can do the 5%, 10%, 20, 25% off all over social, right? And your fans and followers are hopefully going to see that. Depends on the algorithm and which particular content formats you're using. But in the inbox, it should be about the most exclusive sale you can offer. It should be about the most exclusive access that you can provide, because that gets someone to open that campaign over and over again. If they feel like they can't get it anywhere else, they're going to pay attention to those emails more than they are. The reason why you don't open Nordstrom's every day or American Airlines or Marriott is because you can basically get that same deal wherever you are. You don't necessarily need to be an email subscriber. So why open the campaigns, right? To your question about brands that I think are doing this well, I'll give you two. One of them is the team over at Sweetgreen, which, if you're not familiar, Sweetgreen is this sort of custom salad place in bowls. It came out of the Washington, D.C. market, and I think they've got about close to 100 locations across the U.S. now. They do some really interesting things in the inbox that I don't see a lot of brands do. First, they always drop the latest sort of release, if you will, the new salad, the new bowl, the new thing that they've got, the new drink in the inbox first. That's where you hear about it. One great example of them doing this is for about 4 weeks every year, they have ranch, which sounds like such table stakes for a salad brand or a quick service restaurant, right? Because if you're joining us internationally, ranch is like the most generic dressing for a salad in the United States. Like, we put ranch on everything in the US. People put it on pizza. Like, it's prolific in sort of the sauce category. But Sweetgreen only has ranch one time per year, and it's perhaps like the greatest ranch you've ever tasted in your life. It sort of like harkens back to the ranch as a kid you loved, right? So they come in with like really interesting things. Like, it's a one-word subject line, ranch, and then in the pre-header it's back. Like, those really interesting, tangible, different things that get your attention, because everybody else is trying to give you 7-10 words in a subject line and all chalking in all this information in that subject line and pre-header. But they just try to take it a little bit differently. One word subject line, a pre-header that connects the subject line, and they offer that exclusivity in the inbox for the first 24 hours for every new thing that comes out. So Sweetgreen is one. The other one that's interesting to me is another small brand that's based in the US. And I think this is a trend you're going to see maybe in examples as we have this conversation, is that the small brands tend to be doing things a little bit better. And I'll get to some big brand examples in a second. But the other big one, the other small brand that I love that's doing something interesting is Aimé Leon Dore, which is a fashion label that's based out of New York. They have 3 segments. Someone that's never purchased before but is on their subscription list, someone that's purchased a certain dollar amount threshold, and then a super exclusive VIP who has purchased a certain higher level amount in their cart and bought it. They drip every collection or capsule or whatever the fancy fashion term is. That first opportunity to get access to whatever their new thing is first goes to their ultra VIPs. Then it goes to people who have bought a lower level dollar amount, and then it gets to their just generic subscribers, and then afterwards it goes on social. But what that means is that every time they're dropping these collections that their fans and advocates are rabid for, you have to be a subscriber to get access and hopefully get the size that you need for your body, if you will. They don't just drop it everywhere. That's something that 99% of the average retail brands don't do. They drop the deal, they drop the collection. It's like, let's just get everyone and give out this thing to everybody that's following us. The reality of the situation is that if you don't give access or pull back the red velvet rope or create exclusivity in the inbox, no one really has a reason to pay attention. So the more exclusivity you can provide there, the more timely, targeted, and relevant you can be there, the better. On the big brand play, I think if you're going to utilize an example, just go look at the publishers. Look at the best newspapers or news sources in your country. In the UK, that may be like The Guardian. In Paris, in France, that's Le Monde. You're going to go into the US, that's New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Regardless of what your sort of political affiliation is, whether you enjoy reading news from those sources or not, I'm not going to debate that here. But look what they're doing in the inbox. They are really good at delivering interesting things that someone's going to find timely, targeted, and relevant. And the reason why is because they know what your journey looks like when they're on their news sites. What sections do you click on? What sections don't you click on? What interests you? And they're taking that information, that first party data that they've got, and then they're applying it to subscriber preferences and saying, yeah, this person's might like this, and delivering a campaign that's relevant to that sort of journey that they've taken. And that makes it even more impactful for that subscriber. So exclusivity, 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 timely, targeted, and relevant. Sweetgreen is a great example. Ame Leon Dore, and go look at the publishers in your country, because I think they're probably doing a better job than any other big brands out there.
I love this conversation that we're having, Michael, and I think this is why, like, marketer and marketer, like, we get along and we relate to one another, because like so much of what you just said, like, I'm here nodding my head, so much of what you just said I find myself sharing with marketers at every conference as well, especially now working for an ESP. And it's just really changing it's having a mind shift of how you use one platform versus the other, right? So like I find myself nowadays telling marketers, think of social as like that top, using a B2B term, top of the funnel awareness, right? Use social to create top of the funnel, just interest in your brand, right? Like if anything else that you do, talk about what you do, who you serve, what you offer on social. Use social as like your hype machine. But what you really want to do is the velvet rope is that one link in your bio, which connects someone not to your website, but to your email newsletter where they can opt in. I use the analogy. I love the velvet rope analogy because it actually goes hand in hand. I use the analogy of the VIP section for your brand is your email
Mm,
newsletter,
yeah.
right? So it's using that analogy of like everyone wants to be in the VIP, right? It's where it's exclusive. It's where the celebrities hang out. It's where the people of status hang out. Who doesn't want to be in the VIP section? So if you start segmenting your content out, like you said, as such, to where like social's free. I still call it freemium content. Like your content has to be good to keep people engaged in social, but then you're bringing those followers through this journey to where if they want to learn more from, from your brand, they have to opt in. They have to get the deal there. But then that's also one part of the equation. And you can attest to this, right? The second part of the equation is what's that experience like once someone opts in, right? So many times, I'll go back to the Nordstrom example. The only reason why Nordstrom even has my email address is because I shop there enough that I get my receipts sent via email,
Yeah,
right? I
it's
technically,
that receipt, and then the Nordy Club, right? They're getting you into their loyalty program, right?
I technically, to my credit, never even opted in to receive emails from Nordstrom's in terms of like, I don't want to be really marketed or sold to, but because I get my receipts sent to me, they have my email address on file. And granted, I'm not going to opt out because I want to continue to have the convenience of every time I shop getting that email sent to me with my receipt. But this is my whole point. How many customers, like this is more so a question for anyone watching this on the brand side, how many customers do you have that they're learning about you? They're meaning they're opting into your emails the way I just described with Nordstrom's, right? They're getting an email from you with a receipt, and then the next time they ever hear from you, it's an offer, right?
Yeah.
Instead, start segmenting your audience out. And I think you touched on this before, right? Have a segment of like actual customers. And once they opt in, there needs to be a sequence of emails that they receive, at minimum one, that sets the tone for what they can expect from your brand going forward, right? Like you don't want to catch your audience off guard, right? And this is something like I'm very passionately telling marketers about today. Then there's even like the segment of like customers that haven't shopped with you in a while. Like the way you speak to them is going to be very different. And then there's like this kind of weird segment of the people that never open up your emails, the people that never buy from you, but somehow they join your email list. Like the way you engage and speak with them is a completely different strategy and even voice and tone from my perspective of how you speak to like new versus like existing versus haven't shopped in a while versus like have never opened up an email, have never even purchased.
Yeah,
So I
those
think that, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say those segments are so important for people to consider in the context of their business, right? So that you can really start to think about what type of campaign and what am I going to say in those campaigns for those different types of customers. I think one that you hit on particularly that we should spend just a moment on is those unengaged subscribers. So those are, it's one thing to have a net new a customer and pulling them into their welcome campaigns or those welcome automations. You have your high VIP, high spending type of segment. Then you have your sort of low tier, maybe recently churned sort of segment that you're delineating different types of content and copy to. But the one that I would encourage, if you're going to take anything from this conversation with Carlos and I, is go back to your email platforms, whether it's GetResponse or else, right? And look at the segment of people that are completely disengaged from your campaigns. These are individuals that, based on your sales cycle of your product or your business, they haven't engaged with a certain number of campaigns. For most retail brands, for most e-com, DTC type of brands, those are probably going to be individuals that haven't opened and or engaged. And when I say engaged, clicked, replied, done something with the campaign in, let's say, the last 90 days. For other brands that have got long sales cycles like our team, that might be 12 to 18 months. Those subscribers that are unengaged are probably having just as much a detrimental impact on your ability to deliver your campaigns at a macro level than people that are marking your campaigns as spam. It is such an important segment to either re-engage with some sort of re-engagement automation to say, hey, are you listening? Are you looking at this? Do you still want to receive our campaigns? You have got to get anyone that doesn't say, hey, I'm interested, off your list or into sort of some sunsetted segment that you just keep off to the side and maybe only do big brand announcements to, or try and nurture back into some sort of active relationship as a subscriber, because they have such an impact on your deliverability scores as a brand. But you're speaking the truth here when you talk about different segments and making sure that you think about in the context of your organization. What are the types of content? What is the type of tone and voice that I'm going to utilize? Or, perhaps is it a different type of inbox preview strategy, right? Are we going to have a different from name sort of subject line pre-header for different segments of customers? Because that's how you're delivering really more timely, targeted, and relevant content to individuals.
So we still have a lot to cover, Michael. We're about halfway through. Once again, Carlos Gill here with GetResponse, joined by Michael Barber. Michael, we talked to this point about segmenting your audiences, right? Having different segments based on purchase activity, having content that feels personalized to that buyer's journey, if you will. I want to talk about design for a moment. So there's something that you said before about was it Sweet Green
Yeah.
Salad Company in DC?
Yeah.
So you had mentioned that their email subject lines are very short, like 2 words usually. Let's talk about more so like design elements. What are some of the do's and don'ts in terms of like crafting emails?
Yeah, for sure. So this really, the two big categories we can touch on are sort of like the envelope, if you will, a classic sort of, utilizing a card, if you will, as an analogy. The envelope stuff or the inbox preview stuff, that's going to be your from name, your subject line, your pre-header, and then everything post open actually in the email content, like your header, your headline, body copy, subtitle, image, etc. We'll get to that second sort of category in a second. Let's spend a little time on like the inbox preview stuff here for a moment, because that's what's going to drive if someone's going to spend some time, open, potentially convert on your campaign. So from name right off top, I'm a huge believer. This is my own personal opinion. I just want to say this, put a big asterisk on this statement, that I believe, based on having done this for way too long at this point, that the from name is probably the most important part of your envelope content or your inbox preview content. Because again, this is a one-to-one medium. Someone can understand the context of your campaign just from looking at the from name. They don't even need to look at the subject line to sort of understand if they're going to open. I do think that there's value for doing subject line testing. I don't want to like sort of, negate that as a testing opportunity, and to spend, and we'll talk about how to create really interesting subject lines in a second. But if you're going to spend time anywhere on optimizing and dialing in that inbox preview, that envelope header information, it should be the from name. Whether it's coming from the brand, maybe you have specific words that you add to the brand name so that somebody understands what the content of this campaign is. Maybe it's coming from an individual, like an account rep that's assigned. Maybe it's coming from a thought leader in the space, like yourself inside of GetResponse, or the CEO of an organization, right? That from name is super important to build a relationship with a subscriber. So for example, you can set sort of the context of a campaign as an organization by just adding certain words, like in GetResponse's example. When you all send an email campaign about webinars, the from name is not GetResponse, it's GetResponse webinars, right? You're telling your audience, hey, if you're interested in this sort of content, you should probably click here. So dial in that from name, really important. Subject line. I think there's a couple key considerations here to think about at a very tactical level. I think 5 to 7 words is usually like a sweet spot. I wouldn't be going over 7 words. After you get about 35, 45 characters, you're potentially going to get that ellipses and people can't see that content. So front load those subject lines, right? Make sure that they are interesting. You're utilizing emotions in those words, like different sentiments, to try and get attention. Make sure that you're using a diversity of words, right? Are you using the words and phrases that your audience uses versus maybe what your business internally uses, right? You want to make sure you're relative to that audience. You're keeping it simple. You're probably not going to want to put super wordy or words that have a lot of syllables in them, because it's hard for the brain to like get through those words to make a decision if they're going to open. And then on the pre-header, you're trying to continue sort of give your subscriber more information about why they should open. So maybe it's continuing a little bit more information that is complementary to the subject line. But again, keep it simple. Make sure that you're utilizing the right words, the right emotions to convey what you want someone to pique their interest on, and giving them a little appetizer, if you will, to the entree of that campaign. So that's everything in sort of like the inbox preview area. Let's turn
so
to
before we get to the body. So I want to go back to something you said, because it's so good. I don't want this to slip, my mind, or anyone that's even watching or listening to this. So the from statement, and like, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, I'm going through this right now in my role as well. Like, if we're sending out a campaign to, for example, prospects that met me at a conference, it should come from the person that they met at the conference, which is me, versus the company name. So should brands scrap the brand name altogether and start getting in the habit of sending the email from a human being's name, like, Carlos at GetResponse, or you can still incorporate the brand name, but at least it's coming from a human being. That's question one. The second half to that is the email that someone can respond to, or whom it's coming from, because so many times I see an email come from no reply at brand.com, right?
Yeah.
So again, if I'm trying to form deeper rooted connections with my audience, but my audience can't even reply to the email, now it seems like the email is a one-way street, and it's just self-serving to the sender and not so much to the receiver.
Let's answer the second question first, because it's really easy. If you have no reply, pick a different email address, because you're telling your subscriber you don't care about them. If they get that feeling right off the bat, they're not going to be interested. And also, I'll just say this. You actually get bonus points. You get deliverability bonus points, some subscriber health bonus points when someone can reply and the brand replies back to them. The ISPs, the Gmails, Barracudas, spam traps in the world, they look at if a brand is replying to promotional campaigns.
Interesting.
So we'll answer second question first. Number two, should you just scrap the brand name? Potentially, but here's how you think about the sort of out of that same analogy: timely, targeted, and relevant. Relevancy is going to be important on the from name. If someone came in from your website, they converted on a form or something like that, it's probably the right strategy, the right plan for those first initial email campaigns to come from the brand, because that's where they've established the relationship, right? But if they've established relationship at a conference, or you're the face of that brand, then perhaps that persona needs to come through in the from name too. So the case of our organizations, I lead marketing in an organization called Grow Schools. Because I am the face of our Tuesday Tips live sessions on YouTube, because I'm the face of a lot of social content, our campaigns traditionally, and they see my face on like our subscription form, come from Michael, the @ symbol, and the name of our organization. Because we've established that, hey, I'm the person sort of that's behind the scenes helping you get to know about our organization. So that begins to form a relationship. I think the same is true in an example I just shared, like for GetResponse, right? If someone's coming in and seems to be really interested in GetResponse webinars or GetResponse guides or GetResponse resources, you can have those different from names when you're dropping content into the inbox that's relevant to that sort of from name, right? But you've just got to think about what's the context, what's the relevancy of where they came in, and then building the relationship from that from name onward. And that means you're making a strategic plan of, here's where we're going to introduce this from name. Here's how we're going to introduce this from name. This is the from name for this sort of campaign. You've got to sort of set that up and nuance it as you build that relationship.
Yeah, there's a couple of things to unpack there. First of all, not to promote the end of marketing too hard, but in my book, The End of Marketing, like one of the key themes of the book is brands need to humanize their brand by leveraging personas that they create and lean more on those personas versus the brand logo itself, because people relate to people buy from people. So going back to the Nordstrom's example, right? I would rather get an email from Sammy the stylist that now has a curated email based on my purchase activity. Like, based on my purchase activity over the course of years, Nordstrom's should know enough about me to know my style, what I wear, my sizes. So I would be much more inclined to receive an email and open it and engage with it from Sammy the stylist, right? Who works for Nordstrom's, Bobby the barista at Starbucks, right? Like I could go on and on. Like there's so many ways. One of the examples within then the marketing is, I believe wholeheartedly that we will get to a point in time where when you think of Whole Foods, you think of nutritionists that represent Whole Foods. When you think of Nike, you think of athletes, right, that represent and embody the Nike brand versus you do the logo or the product or the service, right? So I believe, to your point, email marketing, it starts with email. It's always started with email, and it's going to evolve and cascade. If you want to see higher open rates, first of all, it has to come from a human being and not from a entity. And the content itself should feel like that content is tailored to the end user and it's coming from a human being, not a marketing department.
Yeah, I think you're right there to a certain extent. I think the challenge is understanding again, back to this idea of context. Where did they opt in? How did they opt in? What are their interests? For a certain segment of customers, they are just they're exploring your brand, right? They may not be ready to buy. They're just looking for certain things, starting to understand if this is the right thing for them, right? Probably the smarter play there, depending upon the source of that opt-in, is it's coming from the brand itself. Now, the moment a relationship, a potential one-to-one experience is created with that shopper, let's say, as the Nordstrom's example, you go in and buy a pair of shoes from, James in the store. The moment that relationship is established, perhaps there is some sort of automation that's kicked off. It's like James at Tampa Bay Nordstrom's, or, the from name could be adjusted in real time. And then you're sending more personalized campaigns that are coming from that individual. Same is true on the B2B side. The moment that someone is in that they've got the appropriate lead score, or they've, downloaded this, certain asset that we judge them of moving from, like, say a, MQL into sort of that SAL territory, is you begin to introduce this sales rep that's going to nurture the relationship on. Perhaps the email campaigns are coming from that individual. But I do think the context is important for how you establish that relationship in the inbox and then where you go from there.
So let's transition into the body of the email. We've talked about, the from, who the email is being sent from. It's very important to personalize that and make it appear like it's coming from a human being versus the brand. We talked about the subject line. Your recommendation is 5 to 7 words. I do want to ask you emojis. What are your thoughts on including emojis in the subject line?
Well, I'll first say this.
Some people are for it. Some people that are against it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm for it. I think that I say that in the context of this. There's not a lot of data out there that suggests that this is a bad or a good thing. What we anecdotally know in conversations that I've had with a bunch of strategists, and what we typically hear, is that when the emoji supports the subject line's content, it typically is not a bad thing. It can have a lift in potential opens, but not a ton of data that suggests there's otherwise. I think you got to think about this as an audience thing, right? Is your audience going to think of your brand as someone who utilizes an emojis, and does it fit the campaign, right? For a legal brand that's talking to legal scholars, maybe that's not the appropriate play, right? To, maybe have the courthouse emoji in the subject line. Maybe it is. You've got to know your customers. For the Gen Z, millennial, into Gen X, and certainly baby boomers, like my parents, communicate in emojis all the time with me. Maybe it's the right place. So think about your audience there as to answer that question. Test it, see if it works. Just make sure you're utilizing sort of the standard Unicode set of emojis, because there are specific emojis now that are only available on different device types, only available on Apple, only available on Android. They don't work everywhere. Most of your ESPs, and I know GetResponse does this, they're leveraging just the Unicode ones. So just don't go rogue and pick like some Apple specific emoji just because it happens to be available there, because it won't show up well outside of those experiences. But I think test it and see how it goes.
So I'm here smiling because first of all, there is data that supports these claims.
Oh, he's going to prove me wrong. Let's hear it.
So I first want to preface by saying that
is this GetResponse data? Is this
GetResponse data? Spoiler alert!
I like it. Spoiler alert.
So I'll tell you the data because I need to actually give you this data.
Okay,
so
then I can use it for.
Maybe you can use it in your talks.
I've clearly missed it apparently.
Over the years, I've heard marketers, and they say the same thing for social as they do for email, when they talk about humanizing your content or personalizing the content, they usually gravitate to emojis. So I was under the impression as a marketer that if you sprinkle some emojis into your content, whether it's social or email. Now your content looks fun, it's inviting, it's engaging. And I see brands, I've paid more attention to this more recently than I have. I see brands using the emojis in emails. I thought that they worked wrong. So GetResponse every year puts out its benchmark report.
Yeah.
So for this year,
It
GetResponse
just came out,
analyzed.
right?
It
This
just came
the
out.
It just came out. That's right. So this is pseudo breaking news. I get a little bit of latitude for this.
So GetResponse analyzed 4 billion emails sent through GetResponse, with 1 billion of those sent in the United States. So they gave me this raw data. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I'm going to package this up. I'm going to do a cool little ebook. So it's called Engage and Convert. And I'll make sure I send you this report.
Okay.
And I put a human spin on it. The one thing that stood out to me the most, Michael, which is why I'm spending so much time on this, is emojis actually get lower open rates.
Oh, there it is. I like the data
So
support.
based on the data, dropping an emoji into your email is not going to increase the effectiveness via an open rate of your email.
Yeah. I'll say this. It's a macro level trend, right? So I think that the thing we have to take those with a I appreciate the data source. I think it's an incredible resource for people to think about. For some brands, it's going to work. For some brands, it's not going to work. But it's interesting to see that we actually have data now, because there's certainly not a great resource for saying yes or no to that question. So we've got an answer now. That's good.
We have an answer. So let's jump into the body of the email. Like, where's some of the mistakes that marketers are making when it comes to like the body of the email? And more importantly, what are some tips to help marketers or brands be more effective with the body? Because I'm with you.
Yeah.
From matters, subject line matters. Like, these are all the challenges that marketers have to navigate just to get someone to open and then scroll down slightly to see what the context of the email contains.
Yeah, the two biggest mistakes are this: too much content and not focusing on the biggest thing that you want someone to convert on. Generally speaking, you've got somewhere between 8 to 13 seconds to capture someone's attention inside of the inbox. That's at 8 seconds, you're a super engaged reader, by the way. We've seen these stats, the amount of time people spending in campaigns drop, statistically relevant, it decrease over the last 3 to 4 years as we've seen email volume go up. That should, there's a correlation there, certainly. Maybe not causation, but certainly a correlation. The thing you need to understand is, hey, how do I get your attention on the thing that I care about? What is the most important thing? How are you driving to that conversion action? That conversion action may be a button. That conversion action could be a reply. That conversion action could be something entirely different, a downloadable asset, et cetera, right? But how are we capturing that attention right as someone opens that email? And then how are we driving them to conversion? Those are the two biggest mistakes: too biggest content and spending entirely too much time on fluff or a hierarchy that doesn't drive to the most important thing. So things you can think about: clear, concise headers, right? You've got a headline so that someone can clearly understand what's being offered here. An appropriate subheadline, body copy, call to action. Make it so that it's almost like an inverted pyramid is a great way to think about it, right? Take the eyeballs from the top to the bottom. Slim up those headers, right? That first 400 to 500 pixels is going to be the most important real estate. Are you getting to the point of your campaign so that someone has the ability to scroll, make a decision, convert, or continue moving about their day? If you're chalking it full of content, if you're not creating an appropriate visual hierarchy that drives to that conversion action, whether it is a click or a reply, you're going to be wasting someone's time. So be really methodical about making sure that you're not chalking it full of stuff that's going to cause the eyeballs to go all different places and not focus on the thing that you want them to care about, and give it an appropriate visual hierarchy to get to the thing that you are looking for: the click, the reply, the action that you're looking for in that inbox.
Should the header itself be a visual in the form of a graphic that almost teases what the email is about to then get someone to scroll down through that inverted pyramid, or should it be text? I often see brands that they'll use like bolded text with a slightly larger font than the body of the email.
Yeah. So we think about that visual hierarchy. You're trying to get the eyes to go on a journey, right? And in a sort of Western centric society, things that can help get us down to a conversion action or take the thing that we want to do are obviously headlines that are, essentially larger than most of the copy that's on the page, right? So you're going to want to keep headlines probably above at minimum 38 pixels when we come to headlines. Subheadlines in that sort of 25 to 35. Body copy no smaller than, my best practice is 16, but you don't want to go below 15 pixels for font sizes, because then the human eye, even with 20/20 vision, has to bring that device closer to their eyes. So you're making your subscriber work to understand what's happening on that page. In terms of like the header itself and sort of visual assets like an image, there's been some interesting sort of anecdotal data that I've seen out there that suggests that a headline, body copy, call to action, then supporting image underneath it typically converts higher than putting the image, headline, body copy. Here's probably why. You're making someone work through the image and understand what's happening through the image versus some quick copy that helps them just read it and decide if they're going to take a conversion action. So I would test those formats, right? Image, headline, body copy, call to action, and then the reverse: headline, subheadline, body copy, call to action, then image. I'll also say this about your headers. You've only got so much time, and a lot of time time to get that person's attention. And a lot of examples that I see out there are brands that are like chalking their headers full of a huge logo, all their social icons. It is not the time to do it. If someone understands what your brand is, they don't need a massive logo to understand who it is, especially if you've built that relationship already. And they certainly don't need 14 calls to action in the header of all the different social networks
Good
that you're
point.
on. Get to the point of your campaign, because that's what's going to drive your engagement metrics in the right direction.
So let's talk about the call to action, right? Because let's just keep it 100 here. Most marketers, and not all of them, are using email marketing to drive more sales for their organization. So you put all this work into perfecting the email itself. Now you have to get people to click on that almighty button that's going to bring them to your website, where now it's a whole nother experience. And hopefully you're still keeping this customer along for the journey so they can go ahead and buy. So like, what wording is ideal? Is it like click here, buy now, shop now? Like, I've seen so many different variations for that call to action button. Like, what do you find is the sweet spot?
I mean, certainly you can be customizing the content in those buttons by subscriber. So that is a personalization opportunity, is to say, based on the device type or the thing that this customer has done in the past, here's the type of button we're going to serve. But I know most brands aren't going to be doing those things. So I'll try and give some general sort of macro level recommendations. Just make it interesting. Like, everyone's doing buy now, everyone's doing register here. What's different? What can you do to like just make it feel a little less boring at the end of the day? So can register here can be RSVP. Register here could be save your seat. Buy now could be buy size large if you know that person has bought size large, in the past. Think about what makes it a little bit more interesting. Learn more, the most generic of generic, calls to action. We can do something different. Like, we can leverage our brand voice and our brand tone to make it a little bit more interesting. So take the time to just try and make them that much more less generic. That'll hopefully have as much impact as you can for the sophisticated sort of oldie but goodie email marketers in the room. And for those that have got, massive subscriber lists, it's probably time to think about how you can personalize the actual button copy to make it even more relevant and targeted for that subscriber.
Yeah, I use Level Up, right? In terms
There you
of
go.
the learn more, the click here, if you want to level up. So let's stay on that theme about leveling up. Like, what are some maybe pointers that you could give to someone to help them level up their design along with their messaging?
Okay, some pointers to level up. Don't make your email 100% image based. You need a healthy combination in most cases of actual copy and text and images. If you bake everything inside of images and someone doesn't have images turned on in their inbox, they're going to see a sea of nothing and just your unsubscribe preferences footer area, which is not a good look, right? So if you are doing 100% image-based emails, take the time to get a template, and certainly GetResponse has got hundreds of these available for you too in the platform to customize and lay out something that is a healthy mix of text and images if that works for your brand. For some more B2B orgs, that's going to be thinking about, hey, do we want to experiment with 100% text-based emails that feel more like a one-to-one sort of traditional email campaign? Tone and voice is going to be the next level up, right? In a sea of sameness inside of the inbox, the ones that I'm always clicking on are something that feels like the brand, like it's coming from the brand, right? Like I get a sense that their brand personality, their brand tone and voice, that uniqueness is coming through in their campaigns. It's not just generic. It hasn't been. It's not the same old thing that's been in the inbox forever. Leveling up could be personal, like we talked about, personalizing certain pieces of the campaign, like the call to action, buy size large. I always buy size large t-shirts. Why isn't someone just directing me to buy size large, and then it selects the large and I just have to press buy now and it's in my cart and I'm out of there, right? So those are going to be level up opportunities, as well as how you can go about customizing different content inside of the campaign that's more relevant to your end subscriber.
So to recap, should be from a person, subject line, 5 to 7 words, body itself, the structure, mix up text along with images. Think of like an inverted triangle or pyramid. Your goal is to get your end user to scroll down so then they can click the almighty button and then go to your website to buy whatever it is that you're selling to them. Let's talk about metrics, okay? We haven't touched on that yet. What are the metrics that matter the most? And you can't just say conversion activity. Let's go deeper in that.
Yeah, let's talk sort of let's talk first about level this up to sort of business goals, right? Because the metrics that a business is going to care about is based on their OKRs or what they're trying to drive for the organization, right? So if your organization is trying to drive eyeballs, you're going to focus on metrics like deliverability, open rate, potentially read time inside of the campaign, potentially reply, right? If that is what the CEO or the C-level cares about, is pure impressions, then you're going to be focusing the metrics that matter on those sort of inbox pre-open activities, if you will. So how many do you get deliverability based on your subscriber list? And 2, do they take the time to open? Now, if your business metrics your business cares more about conversions, then we're going to be looking at not only just the deliverability and opens, but we're looking at campaign content too, clicks, read time, replies, etc., driving those all those major engagement metrics. I do want to say this as well. There's also an additional part of this conversation when it comes to metrics that we should care about. The big one, a category of metrics we have to care about is what drives our ability to even get into the inbox, what drives our subscriber health, what drives that ability to actually deliver our campaigns for net new subscribers, and the health of our domains as well. And there is an important distinction that we need to talk about. Most of the ISPs these days are judging a click or reply or foldering higher than they are the open. Open rate, I think, categorically is probably not an engagement metric we should be caring about as much as we have classically cared about in the past. But when we think about ensuring that our domain health, our actual deliverability health is as high as possible, we've got to make sure we're actually getting subscribers to take an action step, whether that is a reply, click, folder, or something that feels like that subscriber is engaged. Because as we talked about at the top of this hour, one of the biggest things that the ISPs, the internet service providers, are looking for and caring about right now is, hey, do you get unengaged subscribers off your lists? And the classic way to understand if they're unengaged is if they're not taking that sort of reply, click, or convert action.
That's very helpful. So we've got a couple of minutes left. I feel like this is the first of probably more webinars that we'll do together at some point. A big fan of you, Mike. So let's talk about your course now. So you create a course with GetResponse. It's going to be dropping soon. Tell us about the course.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a top to bottom course on everything from deliverability, how to optimize those inbox previews or that envelope content, all the way through how to optimize that campaign content. We talk a lot about engagement metrics. We dive deeper into what matters for deliverability, what matters for eyeballs, what matters for opens, what matters for conversions. We go through things like subscriber preferences, and then something we didn't get the time to talk a lot about, but we touched on a lot about here, personalization and automation. We'll have to do another webinar, you and I, on just that topic, and hopefully I won't wax on poetically and not get to those questions that we plan to get to. But there's 2 sections entirely built around personalization opportunities. How do you go about making sure your email is as targeted and relevant? We talk about all the personalization categorizations, like different demographics, psychographic data, behavioral data, location data, all those things that you can personalize campaigns. And we talk a lot about in another section, automation. So what are the most important automations, like welcome, milestone, re-engagement, so that you can get some really tactical recommendations from top to bottom across your email campaigns. And I'll say this, if you've got, as GetResponse is, always open to feedback. If you hop into that, I hope you take the time to hop into that course and take it. And if you've got feedback of what works, what doesn't, I'm all ears. I would love to hear that feedback from our attendees today, as well as when they get the chance to check out the course.
Once your course goes live, the attendees, they'll receive an email. So definitely sign up for Michael's course. In the spirit of keeping today's webinar evergreen, we're not going to get into Black Friday. However, Michael and I will be leading a webinar here within a couple of weeks to help marketers prepare for the biggest shopping season of the year, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and the holidays. Before I let you go, Michael, tell us, what is one trend as it pertains to email marketing that has you really excited?
I think the biggest thing for me, as I think about what's on the future, is, again, this ability to really create a one-to-one experience. We've talked about it for years, but it has traditionally been a one-to-many experience in the inbox. And with the advent of everything that we're getting from AI and continuing the evolution on machine learning inside of the inbox, and the tools that GetResponse and other ESPs are putting out there, we are really on the horizon of even a mom and pop brand, even a small creator like myself can have a one-to-one experience based on the data that we've got and the information we've got on our subscribers and all the third-party data that's out there, so that we can create really timely, targeted, and relevant campaigns for our subscribers.
Michael Barber, we are at time, but where can the viewers out there connect with you?
Yeah, I'm at Michael J. Barber on most of the major social platforms. You can find me LinkedIn, Instagram, Threads, or just drop me a note on my website. It's www.michaeljbarber.com.
Michael Barber, thank you so much for your time today. Make sure that you sign up for Michael's all new course in partnership with GetResponse on our new content monetization platform. Michael, as always, it's a pleasure to collaborate with you. Thank you so much for your insights. And I look forward to doing this again with you here in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Carlos. It was so good to see you.
All right, my friend. See ya.
Bye.